Hi everyone, welcome to API Days London, where I will be talking about APIs, of course, but also multiple topics on how we can join and have people working both in technical, in engineering, and the business working together with API. The main point would be to know, first of all, we are all working with API. Some of us know about it, some of us don't. For example, my parents are not aware they are working and doing stuff with API every day. Every time they send me a message through any kind of application, anytime they use a credit card or anything. So API really is always seen in like 99% of the company as something that is technical. Like, what's an API? How is the API working? Are we speaking about REST? Are we speaking about building an API with Java, JavaScript, Node.js, Rust, any kind of technology? Do we want to deploy this API backend solution on any specific cloud provider? Do we need specific information, specific value, specific services that are only provided by one cloud provider and not the other one? What's our type of architecture that we want? It's always seen, so API is always a technical, let's say, discussion. If you go to a lot of companies around the world, when the word API will be uttered and will be just discussed, it's always on the technical part of the company. It would be better, but I think you will never heard some people from the business talking about API. The only exception is for companies that were able to define and provide APIs that are being used by other companies and to bring this API or data to gather more information. I'm Jean Burellier. I'm currently working at Sanofi, and I'm leading the platform team there. I'm also a professor at Supinfo, which is a French university on computer science, and you can find me doing open source work, mostly at Node.js, but also other projects around JavaScript and Rust. I'm really passionate about a lot of stuff. First one, traveling. Second one, I'm French, so I have to like and love food everywhere. And also, you can guess, teaching. You can find me pretty much everywhere on Twitter or X now, I guess, Blue Sky or GitHub with every link. But the main topic for today, I started discussing about API. But the main topic would be how can we work with API? So battle-tested API, tech and business working together. How can we bridge the gap where the business don't know anything about API and the tech or the engineering part don't know a lot about the business? How can we have everyone working together to reach the same goal of providing the best API both internally for the company, but also externally for the company to be able to exchange data and to work across a wider ecosystem at least. Great. First idea. Every time you have an issue, what do? You sit around the table with 5, 10 people, you discuss, you find a solution, problem solved. Great. That would be perfect if it was working like that. Unfortunately, so we would be our success, fulfillment, and we would be like, yes, my job is done for the day or the week or the month, and every company now will enjoy working and building APIs. Unfortunately, it's not really the case. Most of the time, you will have a big misunderstanding between different parties that are working with API. It's something that changed slowly, but it's still changing, so that's great. For today, we will be talking about first an API, because if the main part of the talk is about API, it could be great to understand and to have the same definition for API. Also, how can we change the world if we don't change the mindset of people that build and work with API? And finally, some tips and some feedback about how can we like bridge this gap between the business and engineering. Okay, first part, API. As of today, we all consume data. We all are people that are using, I don't know, smartphone. You use your laptop, you use tablet, screen, everything you can imagine, even a smartwatch. You as human consume data through applications, through mobile interface, through just interface basically. Even if it's not necessarily just screen, could be other way to represent application. And for most of the company, and you take all company from banking to insurance company to healthcare company to pretty much everyone. Most of the time, company and in-company APIs are not really well known. They're only known to people working in the tech part, maybe some people from the business, but if you ask to someone that don't deliver work with IT, they won't know what it is. So an API is most of the time not seen as a product, is it's only seen as a part of something more global or a more global product that will encompass both the API, maybe multiple front-end application or anything else. For example, every time you need to define and to create an application, to generate a contract, to subscribe to anything online, to create or sign a PDF, to send a message to some kind of social network or something like that. You use API, yet the main product that is seen by the company is most of the time it's not the API, it's I want my user to be able to do some operation. And APIs is always hidden behind some complexity. But for a company, it's also the core of system. For example, let's take a really, really standard example. If you want to, if you have to remove every API from any kind of social network, let's say Twitter, what would happen? You would have a great maybe front-end interface, a great mobile application, but without API, you won't have a way to get data from your backend for your databases, or you won't have a way to really send messages to someone else. So your application will almost be siloed into just your smartphone or your own computer, stuff like that. You won't be able to exchange information with another service. So basically, you can have an API without a front-end application, and you cannot have a front-end application if you don't have an API, or at least a useful front-end application that is able to gather data and communicate with other people outside. So this is the main topic. And also one key point I think that is really important to discuss is for us human, we always discuss and we always use an interface when we work with API. Most of the people don't work with API, whereas machine, computer, and even other API always use APIs. So in total, you have more users of API that use API directly than people that use some kind of front-end application or visual application at least. So going back to my API, this is a way to display an API. For that, I just open the API pages on GitHub. So api.github.com/user/Shepley, which is my name and my account. And on my browser, it just provides me this kind of information. So this is just a basic JSON file with key value. And that's still pretty easy to understand for a human, but maybe not the best way to display some information. I guess every time you browse internet and you navigate from one website to another website, you prefer to see some more information like this one. Basically, this is providing the same information. It is still providing an image, my name, my nickname, how many repository, a list of pin repository, number of contribution, like a lot of stuff, which are pretty much the same thing that you could find in the previous request. And for all of us, it's way easier to display information that way. But technically, if you want to work with data, you can also use any type of spreadsheet that you can imagine. This one, I think, is coming from a Google spreadsheet. So you can do just using import data, you can just query an API and get the result. So basically that means that having or getting access to information is only conditioned by the use of an API, not by any kind of front-end application. So basically, API should be seen as a core of your company, not just something that is being part of one product, one project, and only used here. Technically, everything relies on your API. So, and a way to use API can be reversed from building, like I said, native application, desktop application, web application. You could even link some data that are coming from an API to, I don't know, maybe you like to turn it on or off, or a fan or stuff like that. So API are just a way. API are really the core of your system, not just one way to send information. Without API, I would guess most of the world of today would collapse, or at least change drastically. So I was speaking about API, but before we want to change the world and to have everyone using API, everyone understanding API, that would be great. Yet I'm not sure my grandparents will be keen or even interested to learning about API each time they open a door on some specific place or they use a credit card to pay for some groceries or anything like that. But so first, before we want to change everyone, we should to work on changing the mindset of people that work around API and also how we work with API directly as engineer, as people from the business, and encompassing that as companies that provide and work to build the best API for their business. And for that, I think a quick discussion here that could be really interesting is to speak about and to talk about API first, because there is multiple way to build and to develop APIs. But for me, the first really important way would be to consider your API as first-class citizen. Like I said just before, API is a core of your system, not some small dependent technical one that no one wants to care about. This is a core of your system. So an API first really encompasses this idea of building an API first approach, which means trying to build your API to be consistent, to be reusable. Simple example. You work with 2, 3 API. You enter, I know, username or nickname or pseudo. Don't care about the name you use on the first one. But you want to use the same key or the same word to define it across your full ecosystem. If not, you will have to jungle every time to say, oh, in my first API, I use nickname. On the second one, it's username. The third one, it will be, I don't know, email or some ID user or something like that. And then if you try to build a set of API and read core APIs for your company, it will be really hard because you will lose a lot of time trying to understand every changes between every API that you try to discuss. So the first report when you build API first would be to have and to be ready to try to standardize how people are building API and how and which of your API you want to define, which way you want to define them, with which key and how they interact together. And for that, you need basically to have a contract, what we call a contract for an API, which basically just a way to say, okay, my API, when I do a get user, I want to return this set of field or property. When I do a post user, this is which value are required and what can be the output. So maybe a success, maybe an error, but what's comprised, what's inside a success feedback or an error feedback from the API. So you really want to define how your API behave. Which means also that people won't grab a pen or grab their computer and their favorite keyboard and start writing API. It also means that you want both your technical people and business people to think about how you should design your API. What would be the use case of your API? So it involves having a bit more planning and collaboration when you build API than just rushing into the code and just building something that works. We try to build something that is scalable, able to scale, to withstand time, which is the hardest part on when you are building API. So this is a key topic and metrics here. And also why I'm discussing about that, because for me, APIs is one way that allows company to break down capabilities of core services into a lot of individual autonomous services. So if you're writing code already, you will jump to microservice definition for that. Not necessarily but this one, but the main idea would be how can you, for example, I will take an email. I guess in a company, I'm working for Sanofi. There's 100,000 people working there across the world on multiple topics. As you can guess, we are sending email or even sometimes sending, I don't know, SMS or messages when depending on some API interaction, like if you're asking for a new password or maybe a two-factor authentication or some other link. For most of the company, every team or every business unit will try to create its own API. Maybe its own API to send an email, which means for a company like us, it's, I don't know, maybe 50, 100, 100, 200 different APIs that basically do the same thing, but are just done again and again and again, which for me, it's really waste of time for everyone, the company, the people, and even the quality suffer from that. So having this kind of API first strategy is something that allows organization to build API, and this API need to serve all applications. So transversal part on building API to reuse across your company. And then You can, by doing that, when you build other specific application, that means that application don't need to redevelop and to rebuild this specific API to, if I go back to my example, to send an email, because you already have it inside your company. And then you can start to build a catalog of API, of reusable API, and start what I will call composition API, which would be a way for every application that you build to say, okay, every time I need to build an application, I have this core set of maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 different API that are always working. I'm one click away to be able to use them. And this allows you to gain a lot of time and also improving your quality as well. So if I had to resume quickly in one slide, what's the benefit of working with an API first approach? First, parallel development. If you have to build two API, one to send an email, another one to send messages or to generate a PDF from some data, great. You can have two teams working on that and just putting the finished product into this big catalog that is available for the company as well. Also cost reduction, because it will be done only once, which is great. Standardization. Every API will know how to work, and even your developer will be able to remember, oh, I know how to send an email. I did that in my previous project 1 month ago or X week ago. I don't have to redefine a new API, find a new provider for that, etc., which boosts by a lot your speed to market. Depending on API and how you consider them, you could build API and have them being published in production and being available in less than a week in certain time. My best record for this one, for a really simple application, was like less than half a day to define it, develop it, and push it up to production, being fully tested and fully validated by both technical and the business. And everything like that provide a better developer experience, but also help to the company to define something and to bring the API as being a product, a core product for the company. And to do that, something really easy, there is a big initiative that is part of the Linux Foundation, which is called the Open API Initiative, which is, I guess, a foundation. I'm not really sure exactly about the coming back, but it's based on Swagger that has been donated and is now, I think, open source. The main idea would be to present and to be able to define, okay, I want to define some Swagger or some API definition. How can I do that? Great. I can do that with a basic editor writing YAML or JSON. And I will come back to that. I will just show you that a bit in a few minutes, what it does look like. Okay, could do it live or just with an image. The main idea is on the left side, you will have just, in this case, it would be YAML file. So you define specific value, like on line 81, I have a post, which is a method. I have a summary for this endpoint, specific name. I can define my request body, and I can define the schema of every type. And then I can also define my response 200, 300, and stuff. And on the right part, it allows me to define, let's say visually or more visually, what would be the result of an API like that. So on the right side, you will have, okay, I have a put endpoint, put/endpoint, post/pet endpoint, get /pet/find by statue, etc. And it gives me an easy way to visualize pretty much everything. And then if you start to really and want to enforce that to your company across the whole ecosystem, you have to build a governance group. A group with people from engineering, from the business, and the main idea and concept for these people are both working on API, but also to guarantee some compliance and use case across your API. So those people should be the people who say, oh, we are missing this new API because I was talking to the business, they need multiple ways to send some QR code, let's say. So we need a way to generate QR code. Great, let's create one and only one API for that. And the main idea for this group is to be able to validate new API, to work also with a team on monitoring and on testing on the API. And like I said, being able to be in advance, discovering new missing API that some team could work on to help both the technical part, but also the business as well and the company globally on that. And finally, the last part on bridges between business and engineering, because I think it's really the most important part, is it's always hard to communicate. We are not doing exactly the same job. It's not the same expectation and everything. But using API, I think, is something that should not divide us, but should bring us to working together on the same idea, on the same core concept for the company. So if you see your API as a core product, then this product should be known by the business, because if it's a product, maybe it can bring value, direct or indirect value to the business. First one, having API that are accessible from outside can bring new customer and new market. For example, you could work with other company to create some way to exchange data or to monitor some specific data, or to work on ways to improve the value that you both and all add. Having this set of API, you can also bring a way to monetize your API. Maybe you want, like Twitter and Elon Musk did, restrict. You can only do, I don't know, 1,000 free API call per month. After that, you have to pay a certain amount. That's something that works. You can also work with more data, because it won't be only your data, but maybe the data from other customers, from other companies that will be working with you and sending you data or creating new business. And basically, this will allow businesses to boom in a phase that you won't be working alone with your company, but you will be able to interact directly and automatically with a full market of technology around you. And if I have to split also on specific side on how and what we can do both on the business engineering, I'm trying to resume that in 5 points. So first, I'm working as a tech lead and principal engineer on most of my cases. So the main idea is really to be able to provide data to the business about the API. It could be about observability, could be about analytics, could be about, oh, we build this new API, we are seeing a lot of traffic going there, or no traffic at all. Is it being used or not? So to bring back this information, and a lot of information that are useful to us as a way to monitor the traffic and the usage of an API can also be useful to the business. So I think we should be proactive on sharing this kind of information. We also need to add our voice on our project about using API, how we can build a better community inside the company. And it's really important to be transparent about success and failure, and try to not hide complexity and saying, oh, that's an API, it's done tomorrow. Maybe not. Some API can take less than a day to be created. Some will take maybe weeks. It really depends about the complexity, size of a project, and what you want to do with your specific API. And on the other side, from the business side, I think it's really important to involve the engineering group to be able to provide feedback earlier, not just when the project is given to the business, to the engineering part, but to say, okay, let's invite maybe 1 or 2 people from the technical part, and let's discuss about this new idea or new project that we want to build. What would be needed to build it correctly? This brings more collaboration and more exchange between the two counterparts, which is really great. And for the business, writing API should not be something that is hidden, some kind of black box. They don't know it and don't care. The business people, could be from the PO to stakeholder, should be present and participate into the testing phase. Being able also to ask feedback from engineering on live project if the engineering part is not proactive on specific information. Like every live data is really interesting to share between community. And I think something also really important, and I was able to see a lot of improvement on people and even engagement from the business, is the business should be able to learn and should dedicate some time to learn about the basic of API. I'm not thinking about writing full API in Rust, deploying everything with infrastructure as code solution in a cloud provider. No, I'm just speaking about how can you use an API, what's basically an API. So one key idea for me is to be able to build a spec, let's say the contract with Open API with the business. It should be something that is common between both teams. This allows people to share knowledge, what's possible, what's not possible, what's a use case that you are building it or not. And for us, it's also having the business being involved in testing, which then, oh, the business maybe will try and test your front-end application, try to log in, create a contract, and it's working or not. Great. But I think because APIs start to be something that is core to your business and your product, it should be something that is like being tested completely by the business also, and being able to understand it. And how do you do that? It's pretty simple. Just use something like Postman or any simple way for them to work on that. And I will do just a quick demo here. You can send a basic message with Postman. So this is the same request I did on my first slide showing some code and JSON. So I'm contacting api.github.com/user/shapeloop. I do have a feedback and a return. And something that is really really nice with Postman is here you have a tab that is called test, and you can create tests. You have multiple tests that are being here proposed, and you can just click, like for this one, and it add directly. So you can also directly add tests. So for example, in my previous test, my test passed because my request sent back a 200 HTTP statue. But if I'm doing the same just by chaining and 201, now my test is false. So this is also an easy way to have the business working with you and just, okay, let's grab Postman, let's learn about sending just a basic GET or POST request for my API and writing some specific tests. And if you do that, it also helps you because you can basically export this kind of collection, this kind of test to be reused by maybe by the engineering team and building something on the CI that will run the same test again and again. This way you can automatize some part that would be, even by regulation, should be done manually, because technically if this specific collection was done and sent to the engineering team by the business, this is the same as being tested by the business. And it can give you a lot of insight on how to share the love of API and having people working together on just building API from both perspectives. That would bring a lot more value than just being completely splitted and building API that are not really well thought of or being just used for one specific use case. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to say about API and how we are building at API, multiple API at Sanofi. Yeah, enjoy. And if you have any question, you can find me pretty much everything, like I said, on Twitter, on GitHub, on Blue Sky. So feel free to reach out to discuss about API. That's always a good topic to exchange to.